Hey, long time no see. Welcome back to Mr. Mescher's Lessons. It's been about 2 months since I've recorded a video, and I've been pretty busy. I graduated from college. I've been applying to teaching positions and working, but I've also been reading a lot. And while the novels I've read weren't quite what I wanted to cover for Mr. Mescher's Lessons, I did enjoy reading them, and I finally did stumble upon a novel that would be great for this channel, and that is Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. Now, I had tried to read this novel in middle school, and I just wasn't a fan. I read about the first 20 pages, didn't like it a whole lot. So I tried when I finished high school again, and still not a fan. The novel just seemed kind of boring from the offset, so I gave it up. My fiance had finished reading this for what was likely the 6th or 7th time. She loves the Twilight series, so I figured I would pick it up. My initial thoughts were, well, I'll give it a try. It was popular for a reason. I want to figure out why it was popular, so I will see what's up. My consensus about 20 pages in was, yeah, it's as boring as I remember it. 50 pages in, wow, this is really boring. 100 pages in, holy moly, this is extremely boring. I cannot imagine reading 500 pages of this. Look at this. This is not a short novel at all. This is about 500 pages. It is an absolute honker of a novel. And so I was hoping that in the next 400 pages that it would get a little more exciting because I was bored to death before. Now, what I can say is that it did. Around the 100 to 200 page mark, it did get more exciting. My biggest complaint about it was that the setting was so boring. For a novel that was touted as, it had vampires, it had a young high school age girl, it had an interesting story, it had a great love story. Where was it? Because the first 100 pages included the following things. It included Bella, who was a high school girl who had recently moved to a new town to live with her father. It was just essentially her complaining about how bad her life was, and that I didn't enjoy too much, the incessant complaining. After I got through that and we met Edward and we started to divulge into their story, it was actually pretty good. Now, I wouldn't say it was great, but it was certainly better than the first 100 to 200 pages. When you actually get into the action and the details of their relationship, it's okay. I do have to say that Bella is the most unenjoyable character, or one of the most unenjoyable characters I've read in a novel, not in the same way as Catcher in the Rye, as Holden Caulfield, or maybe from Native Son, Bigger. Those characters are unlikable, but for a reason that I can justify, and I can accept them as just normal people who have their complaints. Whereas Bella's complaints seem pretty off-center and very unrealistic. I can't get into her mindset. To some degree I can. I do feel bad for her that she had to move to a new town with her dad so that her mom could pursue her boyfriend's dream. But to another degree, it just feels like incessant and useless complaining. I had to move because my mom is dating a baseball player and he's looking for a team to sign. So I decided I would move with my dad to make that easier for her. But I'm not happy and I don't have a car and I have to share a bathroom with my dad, and everybody thinks I'm weird because I'm bad at volleyball and I'm the center of attention, but I don't like it. It rains here all the time. I'm from a town that had a lot of sun, yet I'm not tan enough as people would expect. The town is small, the school is boring, everything here sucks. But wait, there is a hot boy, and he's super hot. And I'm going to very silently follow him and hope that we can talk to each other. And that's going to consume the rest of my life for the entire novel. Hello there, I am Edward. I am the hottest vampire that you will ever meet. I am the perfect being. I am super hot. And I am a teenager just like Bella. Doesn't that make you like me? I also want you to know that despite the fact that I've been a vampire and alive for nearly 100 years, I really want to date a random high school girl 'cause she smells good. Edward isn't as bad as Bella, but he's certainly not the greatest character I've seen either. His most alluring feature is that he's hot. He's super hot. He has perfect features. He looks beautiful. He's handsome. He's got muscles. He's basically perfect, and Bella won't stop talking about this, and to some degree I think that's okay. If you've ever been around a very attractive person, you probably think about their attractiveness a lot. However, I don't think Bella's complete infatuation, and she mentions how perfect and beautiful his face
Really?
is nearly every time she has a conversation with him. She gets woozy around him. At one point her heart literally stops.
Really?
Because she's kissing him. And it's just the level of attraction and the constant reminder of how attractive he is very annoying and takes away from the story. Now, if you want to hear about how hot and handsome and beautiful a teenage boy is, that's fine. I think you may enjoy the novel. However, if you are more interested in a good story, it's not super there. My biggest complaint other than Bella is the writing, and it's just very wishy-washy. At times it seems decent, and other times it just seems very poor. As a English lover and a language arts teacher, I look for good writing, and I can excuse good writing depending on who is the given narrator. For example, I've read several novels based on young children or middle school students. I'm okay with those being written poorly if they're being told from a narrator's perspective because it would make sense. But there's no value in the writing past the story here. And for Bella being touted as someone who came from a school that's much more difficult, she seems like a somewhat intelligent person. It just doesn't shine through in the writing. I think the reason that it's so boring for the first 100 pages is because Bella is just set up in a regular town, a regular person. It rains all the time where she lives. She has a cop father. She cooks dinner for him. They don't have a lot of conversations. Her father, he's given no personality at all. We see that Bella cares a lot about her mother. The main reason she moved to Forks is so that her mother can move with her mother's boyfriend and try to join a baseball team. And this is a pretty selfless act. But the selfishness comes in when she complains so incessantly about it. Every piece of her father that she can dismantle, she will. Any complaint that she can lodge about it, she will. It just ends up being very frustrating. I don't necessarily think that she's wrong to complain about some of the issues. I just think that to some degree it's understandable, but to the degree that she goes, it's so frustrating to continually read. Practically out of nowhere, this vampire teenager hottie comes through and just throws the whole story into, no, I wouldn't say chaos, but it throws it into season. So it really begins around that 100-page mark when she starts interacting with Edward. It never explains why Edward was there, and that's one of my favorite parts, is that it never directly explains some of these things. So we don't get a super intense backstory of how they became vampires, at least in the first novel. We have to, at least to some degree, infer that. And I love that. I love that it's not ever said why they moved to Forks, but the reason is likely to camouflage themselves in the real world, in a small town that rains a lot. I love that. That is great writing, and that was one of my favorite things. However, this also starts Bella's even more selfish nature. At times, she thinks that I'll just leave him alone. He's not a great person to be around. He's spooky, and I don't think I should be around him. But most of the time, it's, wow, he's so hot, and I look at his face, and my heart melts, and I touch his hand on accident, and fireworks go off. And that's cool. I'm cool with that writing. However, when it's constant, she becomes very selfish. Towards the end of the novel, she makes a very, very selfish decision, which she thinks she's doing selflessly, but she has her motive behind it, and it's just very frustrating to see her flip between this absolute selfless nature, which is cool, but then a very selfish nature, and seeing such a flip-flop so often is demeaning to the entire story. Well, after quite the tangent of complaining about the novel, let's get into some of the good things. The first thing was the story. The story was pretty interesting after you got through the first 100 pages. I think that if you are willing to give the novel a read, push through it, the story will be very interesting. Edward and his family have a great backstory. I love to read it. It's not too in-depth. I wish it was a little more in-depth and they had cut out a little of the fat of the first 100 pages. But Edward and his family have a very cool story, and I love that each of his family seemed to have a superpower, almost like they're a superhero family, and that was cool to see. I love to see that. Edward can sometimes be intolerable, but by the end of the novel, you realize that he's been alive for nearly 100 years. He's experienced a lot of life. It's probably boring for him to pretend that he's in high school, so I forgive him to some degree for that. The love arc is sometimes very cute. It's awesome to see Bella fall in love with Edward. Some of the displays that they have and how interested they are. At times, it's a little cringy. They act like punk, emo kids, too afraid to do something, but they have like all this pent-up energy and love, and not my cup of tea, but for the most part, it's pretty enjoyable. The vampire details in the background is epic. I love the story that Stephanie Meyer crafted here. It is awesome to see the uniqueness while also seeing the history that she put into. Now, that's only a tiny part of the overall novel. Let's say 30 to 40 pages are devoted to telling us some more details about these vampires in the world that they live in. I'm sure it'll be divulged a little more in the future novels. That was cool. It was really cool to see how detailed this world was. It gave us a little history of the vampire-esque world of Twilight. Forks is also a pretty good setting for the novel after you realize it. You'll probably realize that about halfway through the novel, that Forks is a really nice location and it makes sense and it's cool, and I love that. That's really cool. The idea of Forks being this small, rainy town that doesn't have a lot of people who are going to pay attention, and that's why the Cullens moved there. That was awesome. My verdict for the novel is between a 4 and a 5. I certainly don't think the novel is terrible. I think the story makes decent sense and it's enjoyable to read. Sometimes details are just flowing absolutely out of the novel, and sometimes you wish for more. So it's very wishy-washy. At times good, at times terrible, so you got to meet somewhere in the middle. There was a lot that could have came from this novel had it had more substantial time given to the writing and to the character development for each of the characters. Charlie, who is Bella's father, is almost given no real personality outside of that he exists. We don't see a lot of Bella's mom, but when we hear from her, she's treated as annoying yet tolerable. And I feel like the novel could have used a lot more. In 500 pages, I figured that they would be able to get some of that character development in there, but unfortunately not. That would be on my wish list. There is a new version of the novel coming out. It's told through Edward's perspective, and I'm looking forward to reading that. I will be reading the rest of the series, but I'm looking forward to reading that to see if it shines a little more light on the world of Twilight. If you enjoy vampire stories, you enjoy cool backstories to vampire stories, and you want to see an interesting love arc, this is a decent novel. It will get people reading. This is a great middle school novel. However, past that, I can't superfluously recommend that this is a necessary pickup. It's certainly even on the back of more modern novels that have come out, like The Hunger Games, like Harry Potter. This is probably the bottom of the rung for me. But if you find those details interesting, sure, pick it up, give it a read. It's a really long book, but this will satisfy your reading craving. Thanks for watching the video. I am looking forward to getting back into Mr. Mescher's lessons and making more videos for the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.